Flying cars, CRT TVs, spaceships, 16-bit computers, synthetic organisms, and rain in Los Angeles, Blade Runner is a very unrealistic interpretation of our future, especially when the first one is explicitly set in 2019. It's even an unlikely situation in the sequel that is set 30 years in the future. Now, before I get ahead of myself, I should probably put up some spoiler warning. I will be talking about Blade Runner 2049 and the original, and the first 2 seasons of the Man in the High Castle TV series. I will be focusing more on the worlds they are set in and not really any plot points, so I don't think anything is going to be ruined, but spoilers are in the eye of the spoiled, I suppose. Also, the novels these properties are based on are very different, so I don't think anything is going to be spoiled from them. The technology makes no sense, but really I just can't buy that these aesthetics represent what our future is going to be, or even remotely close to it. Like you, I am aware that Blade Runner is a sci-fi movie from the 80s, and therefore it's going to have what the 80s perceived what the future is going to be like. And 2049 is the sequel, so they do need to maintain the look. See, Los Angeles does not look like this, and no matter what Trump does by 2019, it still won't. It's far too Asiatic and industrial. Chinese and Japanese influence is so strong that it looks like their cultures dominate over the American influence of Los Angeles. Both Blade Runners eat sushi, signs and ads are prominently displayed in Chinese, Japanese, and occasionally in Korean. The cultural influences of Los Angeles is portrayed as a working-class city that extracts resources and actually makes things with factories, which in reality it doesn't. While LA is a huge oil producer, in real life they try to hide that fact. And well, LA's economy is more about making dreams over sprockets and robots. It's almost as if Blade Runner's in a different dimension, a dimension that diverged technologically from ours. It had America, and the world as a whole, in a more destitute position, and had a strong Asian influence over California, to the point of domination. I wonder if there is an intellectual property that fits that criteria. Oh yeah, Man in the High Castle. For those of you that do not know what Man in the High Castle is, High Castle, which I will be referring to it from now on, is a TV series where the Axis powers win the Second World War. Like Blade Runner, High Castle is based on a story by Philip K., last name omitted because I still want ad revenue. Here's a brief synopsis. The Third Reich and Imperial Japan divide up the world, including North America, after their victory. Germany got everything east of Denver, and Japan got California, Oregon, Washington, and Nevada. There's a neutral zone between them that goes vertically up the Rockies, but that's irrelevant to this video. As a matter of fact, the German part of America is also irrelevant. But Japan owning the West Coast could explain the strong Asian influence. Picture the West Coast as a colony nation, the same situation as India, Senegal, and Angola. The dominating culture has spread its ideas and influence over every citizen of the colony, to the point that the indigenous culture has fused with the overlords, if it even still exists. That's why a favorite Blade Runner dish is sushi, and why movies look like they're set in Hong Kong with neon streets rather than Los Angeles. But you may say that the Asian influence is Chinese, Korean, and Japanese, and I will say yes, and that also reinforces my theory. Let me set up a plausible scenario. A glorious American city is smashed to bits in the Second World War. It's a hilly semi-desert, so not much is going to grow there, and the former movie industry does not appeal to the Japanese government. So the land is not going to attract any wealth, and therefore not a whole lot of Japanese. However, one resource in the Southern California that the Japanese would really want is oil, and Blade Runner makes this abundantly clear that oil is definitely being extracted. Now, no Japanese person would ever want to go to the colonies and extract oil, so the local white people will do it. But there just isn't enough white people for the demand, so the Japanese bring over people from their other colonies, China and Korea. Over time, the city acquired these cultures as the demographics shift. It wouldn't be until the city has grown in size that the Japanese would even bother moving there. High Castle supports this too. San Francisco is the capital of the Western states, so there is a strong Japanese presence there because a lot of Japanese are moving in. However, we never see Los Angeles in the show, but anytime we leave the Bay Area, there are no Japanese people and the surroundings look just like good old 1940s America. This can also be backed up by similar situations in real life, with colonies that were purely set up to exploit the resources, like Nigeria, Bangladesh, or Vietnam. Europeans tend to live only in the capital cities or ports. The rest of the colony would have almost no interaction with their overlords. Now, I will continue my point by jumping back into the scenario. This change to a dirty oil extraction economy will work perfectly with other dirty industries like factory sweatshops. This would explain why everything is so gritty and there's no mention of film production. You may say a global nuclear disaster would affect it too, but I'm getting to that later. So the High Castle universe explains the demographics, aesthetics, industries, and feelings of oppression in Blade Runner. It can also explain the history and technological divergence of Blade Runner 2. See, High Castle is set in 1962. The Japanese are stuck in the 40s era of technology, but the Reich has rockets that have been to the moon, magnetic trains, and well, I don't think I need to tell you they have a strong interest in biology. In the show, the German higher-ups are already talking about Moon and Mars colonies, so by 2019, surely they would have taken over the solar system and maybe others. So we can check that one off the list. For flying cars, well, they're not in the show, but I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, because I would assume the cars would be invented as a result of improving space technology. But what about the backward stuff like computers? Well, High Castle was never going to get the technological break we got in the real world. See, what we think of computers today were invented by Alan Turing. He invented his thinking machine in 1950s England, which in High Castle was occupied by the Reich. That was bad for Alan because he was a homosexual, which the Reich hated as much as Jewish people. Even if he survived execution, he probably would have no interest in pursuing a thinking machine for such a horrible government. I am pretty sure they would have figured it out though, just decades behind us. That leaves the most important technology, replicants. This will be easy. Contrary to popular belief, they are not robots. They are not
a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
They are heavily modified human clones, which is something we can make today. Yes, we can clone humans and alter their genes to die in 5 years or be born as an adult. We just don't have any need for them. And also, human clones are morally repugnant. But they do play fast and loose with the morals in the High Castle universe. And that immoral world would require human-like working subjects, because the Reich exterminated all the Africans in Africa, along with the Slavs in Eastern Europe. That would also include everyone they wanted to exterminate everywhere else. And on top of that, the Japanese exterminated quite a few people of their own, so Earth would start being pretty vacant. Finally, the history of Blade Runner also makes more sense as the future of High Castle as well. I'll keep it brief. High Castle takes place during 1962, at least for the first 2 seasons, which are the only ones currently out. Throughout the 60s, the Reich gradually colonized the moon and over the decades spread further and further into the solar system. I'll try to avoid any spoilers, so let's just say everything is fine with the world for a few decades. I don't know if the Reich is still around, but someone outside the Japanese sphere of influence creates all of that futuristic stuff because High Castle Japan is already decades behind the times. At some point, probably during the 1990s, Japan loosens up on the West Coast and maybe its other colonies. I say this because the police department is full of white people and a lot of signs are written in English and Chinese. Around 2002, World War III breaks out and there is a nuclear Armageddon. This is stated in Blade Runner lore. I'll let you infer who the participants are. Most of Earth is destroyed, but Los Angeles survives due to it being to an unremarkable oil city. You may think that oil would be an important resource that the enemies would love to see destroyed, but I think everything was running on nuclear power at this time anyway. What oil was being used for was probably for things like lubrication and plastics. At this point, the man in the High Castle universe has fully transitioned into the Blade Runner universe. So I think I've created a compelling argument, but you may say, TKD did not intend for his worlds to connect. But I have one last piece of evidence for you author naysayers. While doing research on the man in the High Castle, he was given the inspiration for Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which was the novel that the Blade Runners are loosely based on, while learning about the dehumanization strategies utilized by the Reich. So there. He was definitely thinking about them simultaneously, perhaps to the point of melding them together. But hey, that's just a theory.
Oh. Wait, that's not what I say. How about this? I'd left a bunch of other things that couldn't be explained, like the seawalls in 2049 and so many other things, but this video is already starting to get too long, so I cut a lot of stuff out. However, I thought I made a very good argument. What do you think? Have I made a convincing argument? Are there any details that would contradict my theory? Or maybe some I left out that reinforces it? Go ahead and let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Oh yeah, and if you are interested, I am wearing an Europa Universalis 4 shirt.